Hello, everyone. This is Kyla from Hidden Gems Literary Emporium. All the way from Vermont, today we have Miss Julia Purdy, the author of The Sky is Red. Thank you, Miss Purdy, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you.
This is quite this literary work that you have produced is quite interesting because it's actually a modernized translation of a story that was published years ago, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you begin by just introducing yourself and telling us why you were so inspired to modernize this story?
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Excuse me. My name is Julia Purdy, and this is a translation of an Italian novel that came out originally in Italy in 1947, as I remember. And um, and I grew up with this in our bookshelf at home. Because my mother served in Italy in the Red Cross during World War II in 1944 to 45. And then after that, she came home and she became a reporter for the local newspaper. And she was sent um, an examination copy of an English translation of this novel. And the English translation was done by a well-known translator back then, um, who happened to be British. And so I grew up reading this and from our bookshelf. But as I went back to it a couple of years ago, I realized that his language use would probably not resonate too well with Americans. Just because he uses some English terminology and stuff like that. So I when I went to Italy at one point, I purchased the paperback in the original Italian, which is still in print, and I brought it home and I started reading it, and I thought, boy, this really needs to be told in sort of American English because it involves um, the American presence in this one town in Italy in World War II. And there's a lot of interaction between the American soldiers and the Italian civilians. And plus, it's just kind of almost a portrait of the young people at that time trying to survive. And their slang, you know, should could really be translated into more English terms that people would relate to. So that was kind of what got me going, and I think I was pretty successful. I did have a lot of very valuable help from a collaborator, Chris Costanzo, who actually, as a boy, was there in Italy at that time because his father was connected with the Foreign Service, and we were trying to get Naples reorganized uh, after the war. And so he really helped me with a lot of the colloquialisms. Um, he doesn't want any particular credit. He's he's really a sweetheart, but I couldn't have done it without him. So thank you, Chris. So I guess that's kind of where I can start.
Okay. And I the reason why we do these interviews is because we want the readers to know the history behind the author and why they chose or why they were inspired to do what it is that they do. And
Right.
it's so interesting to know that this was actually a book from your childhood.
Yes.
So you could say that this book is, well, obviously it's near and dear to your heart.
Yes. In a lot of ways. Yes.
Okay. Um, as a child, what were some of your favorite things about this story?
Oops, I lost just sound just there.
Oh, I was asking as a child. Oh, can you hear me?
Now I can. Yeah.
Okay, great. As a child, what were some of your favorite things about this story, The Sky is Red?
It's about children. The protagonists are teenagers who are surviving in the aftermath of this devastating bombing. It was a strategic bombing by the Allies, and The story centers around probably four teenagers that he may have known or may have known of, or maybe he fictionalized them. But they are living in the bombed out ruins, which are known as the Forbidden Zone. So many people were buried in the rubble that the authorities didn't even try to get them out. And so they put a cordon around this area, and you were not supposed to go in there. But people who had no other recourse, no homes, no family left, whatever, were trying to survive inside there. And so these four teenagers were in there and carving out something of a household. And I think that as a kid, that was the thing that really fascinated me the most, was reading about each one of them, how they were relating together, and how they were coping with all of this.
And it's, as we were reading the book, one of the things that obviously grabbed us the most was how descriptive the poverty is in town.
Yes.
It's quite, what's the word?
Graphic.
Yes, thank you. It's quite graphic and illustrative. You can almost just see it.
Yeah, and I'll just put in there that that was part of that was if not part of it, then the main purpose of why Giuseppe Berto wrote it in the first place. And he was, huh?
Oh, go ahead. Can you just repeat that last sentence? We cut out for a little bit.
Oh, I did. I think that was maybe the main purpose that he wrote this, that Giuseppe Berto wrote this in the first place. He either saw that, he probably saw that because he was an Italian officer in the army. He was kept in a POW camp in Texas, and I understand that's kind of where he started this book, or maybe wrote the whole thing. So he knew the scenes there, and he was really part of that tradition coming out of World War II of Italian literature and movie making, where they were not going to gloss things over. They were like, they saw themselves as kind of almost news reporters documenting all of these things that happen, but in a fictional story sense. So the famous movies that came out of there were The Bicycle Thief, Open City, so forth. And then also novels came out of there by Americans who wrote about the American experience working in these little towns as the Allies took over the towns. The whole idea was to push the Nazi army back and back and back and back up the peninsula. And they were finally successful. And when they took Rome, that was pretty much, all she wrote as far as the victory went. But the war itself generated this entire new sort of approach to literary writing, and that's partly why it's so important.
I want to ask a question about the cover, and then I want to get deeper into the book. The cover's quite beautiful. Did you design the cover, or is this based on the cover of the original story?
No, I designed, let's say I chose the cover in collaboration with the publisher, with Lit Prime, because when you self-publish, they invite you to participate in the design. And so they directed me to Getty Images. And they have a certain arrangement with Getty Images where, certain ones can be downloaded for free and so forth. So the cover, it was unbelievable, the coincidence. That image is from a photograph by a Japanese photographer that was exactly exactly the way it looks. I was astonished because the forbidden zone is surrounded by barbed wire. And yet in the middle of the forbidden zone, within sight of the house where these kids are living, there was one lone blossoming magnolia tree. And I could not believe I found that picture.
That's so interesting because I was going.
Yeah. And then the background, huh?
No, continue.
Oh, the background, the graphic designer and I collaborated on the background. I wanted something that reflected the flames of the fires that resulted from the bombing, which play a big part at the beginning. And then I wanted to be kind of rough looking, suggest the rubble and the destruction. And then we tweaked the title, for font and size and stuff like that. So that's how that developed.
Yes, and the background, I pause because I want to know if I'm using the right word. But
Yeah.
when you look at the cover and you look at the background, one moment, a customer, Ray, can you go, someone just peeked in. I want to make sure he's looking for us. When you look at the cover, you kind of feel the pain, and it looks almost like scratches,
Yeah.
wounds, but then you look at this flower, and even without knowing anything about the story, you can feel and sense, okay, so there's going to be some beauty that's going to try and push through some type of barrier that is also quite painful. It's barbed wire.
And you just summarized it really perfectly, because the book is not all grim and gloom and doom. There are times when the kids, they're trying to make the best of the situation. And there's one lovely episode there where the boys decide they want to go duck hunting in the marshes along the river where the town is located. And so they all decide to take a day off, and go out there and get the sun. And the boys, kind of move around through the marsh in a boat, and the girls wait on the bridge. And there's a lot of chance for the girls to converse about things at that point. But it's a delightful scene. And then they wind up they had borrowed the boat from a farmer nearby, and so they wind up going to the farm. They unwrap their picnic. They spread it out under a blossoming tree because it's in the early spring. And then the boy goes in and he barters for some vegetables with the farmer. And so you get to see the crusty old farmer and his wife and his farm yard. And it's a beautiful, beautiful day. And the boy and girl that are in the process of kind of falling in love, although they're both extremely shy, they almost get to the point of, confiding their feelings, but not quite. And so that becomes sort of this really bittersweet kind of moment. And so the author does not shy away from those things. He puts those things in as well as some very humorous little experiences that I could go into, but I'll wait and see if we have time. So yeah, you got it right there.
All right. And I like how readers today, and this is, to me, this seems like it's for adults, also teenagers. Readers today can read this book, even though it was initially published years ago. They can read this book and relate in certain ways. For example, the love connection that you just talked about.
Right.
Little things that they do as teenagers. People can read this book and have moments of nostalgia. You know, but also get a peek into the lives of people who even today live in immense poverty. And I think it's relatable in
Exactly.
that sense.
Yeah, and also the thing that was crossing my mind too was I started translating it at the point where we were looking at the war in Syria and the effect on civilians. And so this really, even though it's about these kids, it's about the upcoming generation and the devastation on that generation. But it really is material that everybody needs to remember about how war is. It's always the same, no matter where it is, and it's always devastating and a total waste of humanity. And so he doesn't harp on that. He just illustrates it all the way through the book. And so, these kids are living on the black market. When the bombing first occurs, the boy who was studying to be a mechanic, he gets this idea, okay, there's all these collapsed houses, there's all these ruins. I'm going to go out and scavenge everything I possibly can. So he ropes in two young kids, they head off, and they come back with huge bundles of stuff. And that's where, this is right like the night of the bombing, in the aftermath or the next day, they've all been huddled in a bomb shelter. And so you see the development from the very beginning. And they set up housekeeping in a partially collapsed house. They have to stay in secret because they're in the forbidden zone, but they go out through a house that's on the main street. So officially they're living at that house, not where they are. And there's all kinds of arrangements to try to get vouchers for support. There's just all kinds of arrangements they have. And the older boy, Tullio, is part of the underground resistance. And so at one point he takes the younger boy, Daniele, into a basement under a house where they have this cache of weapons. And, so you get to see the people that are huddled in these hovels, heating themselves with, oil fires, the scarcity of everything. And yet the young people seem to pull some kind of optimism out of it, as they're living. So you get to see not just the poverty, but the poverty that was engendered in a population that before had been quite stable. So, that's that extra dimension.
Right. Um, there's so many underlying themes in this
Yeah.
story that could be talked about. Before we started recording, you said that you had a couple passages that you wanted to read,
Yeah.
that you thought were important for readers to know. Why don't we start digging into some of those?
Yeah. Do you want me to pick one out?
Yes, please.
Okay. I mean, I don't know how much, it's reading, so it would go kind of slow.
Take
but,
your time.
I mean, I could, there's the night of the bombing, which he writes about. And that kind of goes kind of slow, but let me check something. There's the night of the bombing. After the bombing, it focuses on parents who are sleeping in their home in one of those new, what they call skyscrapers. And I could start with that. I think I can start with that. So
Okay.
it's the beginning of chapter 6. I mean, this is the most graphic violence of the violence, but there again, it's only through the perceptions of the civilians themselves. So this is not a novel that's going to, get the weekend warriors going. It's a novel about civilians. So chapter 6.
I'm there.
Okay. The man was startled awake just as the warning siren began to sound. He heard the 3 blasts of the siren from the nearby tower. He had the impression that the sound was something fluid that undulated a long way like concentric rings in still water. He made every effort to stay still. Absurdly, he hoped that his wife had not awakened. But the woman spoke almost right away in the dark. It's the air raid alarm, isn't it? Yes. So I'm going to skip a few lines. And they hear a train in the distance, and that's important too, because that was why that town was bombed. The Allies were trying to disrupt the supply lines for the Germans who had their fortified line just north of this town. So the train becomes an important part of the story if you happen to know the history. So they hear the train, and then it goes on. Still, the man and the woman remained motionless and silent in the dark, waiting for some noise and not hearing anything. There were the usual sounds, of course, the creaking of furniture and the gurgling of the plumbing and so forth, but these didn't enter their thoughts because they weren't the kind of sounds they were waiting to hear. Something might come from outside, and they were alert for it, although they didn't think it would. So the woman gets up, and it's a spring night, beautiful spring night. She goes to the window just to admire the sky and, get the fresh air and so forth. But she's very worried about her son, who was sent away to school in the countryside to, keep him out of the war. The apartment where they lived was up high on the 5th floor of one of the new skyscrapers. From the window, the woman could see far across the plain toward the little town where her son was in high school. Thank God that area was all dark and peaceful. One would be a real fool to be afraid. They were never going to bomb such a small town. From below, sounds reached her of people walking along, talking loudly. She heard them clearly and thought they must be soldiers because they made a lot of noise with their boots. She watched below and saw nothing naturally, only darkness, but she imagined the soldiers that were walking and talking there. She imagined they were merry, poor kids. And it continues. He calls her back to the bed. She'll catch cold. She says, no, I really want to stay here. And she continues to watch and listen. Again, a sound reached her from below, beginning far away. It was a motorcycle that was moving slowly because of the darkness, but making a lot of noise. It spread a great racket throughout the space all around it. And the people inside the houses trembled, and even after they recognized the sound, it still was hard to calm down. It must be a military motorcycle without a muffler, and who knows where it was going at that hour. The sound slowly came nearer. The motorcycle passed the house and continued on, and its rumbling lingered and fluctuated as it bounced off the houses. And I'm going to get back to here for a second. So the night was very clear, the moon was bright. She's there inhaling the beautiful fresh air, and the way it's described, as he says, it was a perfect night for an attack. So then she's listening to the motorcycle. The sound lasted perhaps 3 minutes and then hovered in the air, but differently now. The woman wasn't aware of it because she wasn't thinking about it. At each moment, the new sound became stronger and different. Then the woman looked up at the sky above the city, and she thought it was coming from up there. Certainly it must be a friendly airplane. All alone like that, but meantime she shivered all over and could neither move nor speak. All she was able to do was watch. And right away, then she saw, igniting and remaining suspended in the sky, a cluster of white lights. They seemed to dangle gently in the air. And the man who was looking toward the woman suddenly saw her figure become a dark silhouette against the light outside. Then he lunged to the window. He caught sight of the illuminated city, and in the sky, a cluster of white lights, and then another were descending. Engines droned from above. From a rooftop in the San Sebastiano section, an anti-aircraft gun began to launch red projectiles towards the clusters of lights. The projectiles rose one after another, slowly it seemed, ever more slowly, and died out with little bursts. Let's go, said the man breathlessly. But the woman stared and could not move. Actually, she felt her legs would not move. Through the whole sky, the light grew, and so did the drone of engines. Move, shouted the man, shaking her, and he grabbed her by the arm and dragged her out to the stairs. The elevator cage was empty and useless. So they get down, they start down the stairs. On some landing below, a woman shouted a name repeatedly in a frightened manner and then fell silent. They also heard footsteps below and doors slamming. From the skylight came a white glow like the moon, but more intense and diffuse, a light that did not produce shadows. And they kept going and kept going. Hundreds of engines were in the skies over the city. Then were added the sounds of the bombs that were falling like something that was sucking up the air horribly. So they don't make it down the stairs. The explosion destroys the building. He's holding her tight. The wall falls away, and that's it. I think that the way that was written, and I was, skipping ahead a little bit, but this suspense, the way the author wrote that really captures that moment of terror. And meanwhile, the two teenage girls they were cousins, they were living with their grandmother, they heard the siren. So it's almost like you get the same episode from different points of view, from the woman and man, from the two girls in the building who hear the siren and start to go down to the street. The grandmother who's left behind because she doesn't want to go. And then everybody crunches into the air raid shelter, and they're absolutely terrified. So that's, and then it goes on from there. Then the bodies are gathered and laid out in the piazza in front of the cathedral, and people have to go and identify them. Meanwhile, the boy who's been out in school in the country comes in with his priest to try to find his parents. And he's informed, well, they're probably not here. And the priest and he go back, but then the boy returns alone one night, and that's when he encounters this column of U.S. Army jeeps moving along as they're going through the conquered area, and they pick him up, even though they're not supposed to pick up civilians, and they drop him in the center of the city, which is devastated. He doesn't know where he is, and that's where he meets the second boy, Tullio, who is living by that time in the ruins. And that whole scene is really sweet, where Tullio and Daniele just kind of get to know each other and talk, and Daniele is completely at a loss, and Tullio knows the streets, and he's very streetwise, and so that's where we enter into the house where the kids are living. It's beautifully done. It leads you right along. So I don't know if that's if you wanted to hear anything else, but that was kind of long. But that's where the whole thing starts, is with that bombing, and it was so graphic. And in the meantime, in the very beginning, you get to see the town almost as a character in the story. its location. And that was the thing that really tipped me off. I'm reading the description of the valley where the town is and the mountains heading off into the distance, and the mountains on one side, the sea on the other side. And I thought, I've been there. I know that place. I don't know, and it turns out when I would go and visit my father in Italy, in Naples, when you're taking the train or driving up to Rome, you pass through that valley. And so that's what started me doing the research. Like, what on earth, and darn if I didn't find the historical event. Now, the author doesn't mention the name of the town, but it's unmistakable. It was a small town that was actually bombed. In fact, it was so badly destroyed, they didn't try to rebuild it. They built a whole new town right next door to it. And that town is now a historical monument, the ruined town. You can actually go and tour it. It sounds really weird, but anyway. And so this is built upon an actual battle, if you want to call it that, a bombing run. You can read about it. As a matter of fact, the US government hired movie makers to document a lot of this stuff in the war. And John Huston made a film about this called The Battle of San Pietro. It's a documentary film. So that was the exciting part, is finding out this isn't just plucked out of the author's imagination. This happened. I don't know, that to me, that's the mind blower right there.
Right. And we tell readers all the time, you'll be surprised how many fictional stories have roots in real history, real people, places, and events. And so
Exactly.
we always encourage people, when they're reading something fictional, just take the time, especially if it's a place or an institution, or a main character, a person. Google it or look it up, and you'd be surprised to find out exactly what you're saying now. And it's funny how you said that you felt like the town was a character, because right from the beginning, the author spends a lot of
Yeah.
time describing the place, and it does feel like a character.
Yeah, and it's so important that it's that particular place and not some other place. And I mean, I used to teach English at the community college level. And, when it came to literature, I just said to my students, it looks like fiction, it looks made up, but believe it, because it is based on reality, just like you're saying. Yeah.
That's right. Um, I want to ask you two more questions.
Yeah.
One is, where, well, no, we'll save that question for last. What are some of the main things that you want readers to take away from this book? When they're done reading this book, what are some of the things that you want them to marinate on in their mind?
Okay. Um, I want them to accept what's in the book. What's being said in the book, to really immerse themselves in it, and to come out with an kind of deep understanding of what the book is trying to say, that they incorporate into themselves, so that when, whenever they see a disaster, to maybe, flash back on this book and think about the impact on civilians. Because that's really the theme of the book. It's not, the blood and glory. There was no glory in World War II, but the blood and the struggle of the Allied forces, but the enduring impact on the civilians and how it really changed their whole life. And then also just a sense of a sense of that real people are involved, always, that they're real people like you and me, and suddenly they're thrust into these these catastrophes that they're not going to get out of. It's I mean, a tornado is devastating, like the ones we just saw in Kentucky, yes, but you know, the rest of life goes on around it and will support them. Here it was like, what, you have nothing for, and you don't know what's in the future. You have no idea. So I guess that's the main thing, and just an appreciation of the setting, you know, just the small daily events. There's a lot of, you know, scenes from street life. At one point, Tullio and Daniele are going to take some food to an old man who's kind of shut in, and they're walking down the street, and they see a bunch of little kids all gathered around a cardboard box. And what is this? Okay, so and they look over the kids' shoulders, and it turns out there's a mama cat giving birth to kittens, and the kids are all debating, like, well, where do these kittens come from? Well, they come out of the mother's behind. Don't you know that? You know, it's like, and just those precious little moments of just natural human being. And yet there's a little girl that evidently knows very well where babies come from. And she's standing to one side and her belly is swollen. And Tullio goes up to her and says, okay, how have you had breakfast today? And she said, well, yeah, I had some, you know, oatmeal, whatever. And he said, how many people at home? And she tells him. And so out of his basket of eggs that he's taking, he gives her eggs and says, take these home. It's those things that, it's that glue that holds communities together, you see. And that's the other thing that I hope that people can project out of their reading of the book.
I love that you said that. And Ray and I, we talk to people all the time, and we say, and we actually use this scenario as an example. Let's say a huge, devastating event happened in New Brunswick.
Yes.
Similar to this. Everything is gone. Everything is gone. All we have is each other. We
Exactly.
would be forced to put all of our differences aside, no matter what we disagree on, no matter what, we would be forced to put our differences aside and help each other out. So why not start now? And why not start just putting our differences aside and making better decisions for each other and for our community?
Yeah, exactly. Why wait for a catastrophe? Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for saying that. Okay, so last question. Do you plan on publishing another book in the future? And can you please tell our audience where they can contact you if maybe they have any questions, or perhaps they want this book on the syllabus in any universities? I know we talked about that. So what's the best way to contact you, and what are your plans for the future?
Well, this was kind of a unique thing, you know, being that it's a translation, so it was actually already written. um, I am a writer, you know, I'm a journalistic writer. I would love to be able to start a blog and get a lot of my opinions out there, which may be happening sooner than later. I don't see another novel not a novel. I have a couple of ideas for more of an analytical works. But if people want to contact me, it's very, very simple. I can just give you my email. I don't have a website. I can give you my email, and if they put "the sky is red" in the subject line, then I'll know it's legitimate. Okay, so a long time ago, I gave myself the name of Laughing Otter, and I did because I live up here in Vermont. We have a very long stream that comes out of the mountains called Otter Creek. And it features in a lot of Vermont history. It used to be called the Indian Road because it was a main trade route for the native people. And so I just named myself Laughing Otter, and it's LAUGHINOTTER10 @gmail.com. So there's no extra G in there. It's just there's one G in there. Laughing Otter would be wrong. Wouldn't get to me. Yeah, and if they could do that, just put, you know, the sky is red in the subject line, or, you know, question about, or whatever it is. You know, maybe put hidden gems in the subject line. I saw you in, you know, in the hidden gems interview. What that would be great, because that way you would know that they were responding, right? And then I'd be happy to answer any questions. If they have a question about the historical background, you know, what happened, I can certainly turn them on to my sources that I used. If they want to talk about some part of the book that's disturbing, or, you know, relate to it, like, gee, you know, as a matter of fact, I'll just mention this. What I found out was that, boy, I have it written down, but I'll just summarize it. There is a man in Canada who has done a video of interviews with people who survived that bombing as children. And if they were young children, they're still alive today. Okay. And he found them. They apparently about 3,000 of the citizens promptly emigrated to Canada, maybe through the help of the Allied forces. This is probably how it happened. And anyway, so he found them, and he did this video, and I have been meaning to follow up on that. And I think the video was done in 2018, possibly. I could have that year wrong, but recently. That would be amazing, you know, to listen to their stories. And I hope maybe as a result of this interview, some of them might actually find me, or, you know, and want to, you know, converse about it. I would love to have this made into a movie by an indie director. So if you have any leads, send them my way.
Will do. And if you could send me the information for that interview, that would be great too, because I'm very interested.
You mean the what I just told you about?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm my stuff is all together. I didn't have a chance to dig it out, but let me see here. Yeah, in fact, I described it to the promotional people that set me up with Hidden Gems, Book Trail, right? Yeah, I described it to, I think it was Ryan Noble at Book Trail. So I can probably go back to that email, but I have the information here somewhere. So yes, I'll be happy to do that.
Okay. And we're going to put your email in the description of this video so that people can reach out to you if they have any questions. I think this would be a great read for various subjects of study in colleges and universities, because it's very well written and you did such a great job translating it. It makes it so easy to read and you pick the story right up.
Now, let me get your take on this. You know, this is about teenagers, and they're young teenagers, but they've lived on the streets, so you know they're old young teenagers. I'm wondering. I don't see it as young adult fiction. You know, it's sort of like you pointed out. It sort of straddles the line between young adults and grown-ups, right? Who I'm just wondering if, and it would take a mature young reader to really process, wouldn't you agree? Especially the ending.
I would agree. I would
Yeah.
agree.
So I'm just wondering how to approach maybe that market too. I don't know. I mean, maybe that would be your area to decide, how you're going to promote it that way, or.
Yeah, and it's because older teens, 17, 18, 19, maybe even 16, they are exposed to a lot of these things because you just use the phrase older, younger teenagers.
Yeah.
Because of society and media and what they see, a lot of our teenagers are older, younger teenagers. And so I would say that older teens, they probably know about a lot of the stuff in this book.
Okay. So they
Younger,
wouldn't be traumatized by it. Maybe.
not like, I wouldn't say not older teens, they watch movies with a lot of these. They see these things on television, on their phone. They hear about these things in school. We always like to encourage parents to read with their children. So, parents that have teenagers, this would be a great book for them to read together, because now the parent is there to discern and explain and talk about. And this book can actually be an opener to a conversation about war. They talk about abortion in this book.
Oh, yes.
Poverty,
Yes.
things like that. So, and I'm in a lot of Facebook groups for parents who homeschool, and especially now with the pandemic, a lot of parents are transitioning into homeschooling, where they're looking for books as foundations for their curriculums and things like that. So, high schoolers, this would be a good book to talk about a lot of those quote unquote controversial topics that teenagers still know about, but sometimes parents have difficulty, breaking the ice.
Yeah, true enough. They do. I forget. I forget. It's not like, when I was a teenager and everybody was actually pretty relatively sheltered. This and that's the whole point of the book. It was a rude awakening into a whole new world of reality.
Right. And the fact that it is based in history, based in truth, and like I said, a lot of these things still happen to this day. It would be an honest conversation, honestly, for parents to have with their teenagers. And it's a great book. It's very well written.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for translating it.
Yeah, I appreciate you read it all the way through too, because it's not. I mean, I appreciate you read it, you digested it, you took care with it, you gave it the respect that it needed, and I really appreciate that, I have to say.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And we read all of our independent authors or up and coming authors that display here. We read all of their books because we think that it's very important to give honest reviews, because we don't want our readers to say, hey, you recommended this book and it is not good. And so, when we say that a book is well written or it's a great story, we really mean it. So thank you for your, I'm sure it took you a lot of time to translate this entire story. Or did it?
Oh yeah, it did. I mean, I wasn't in a hurry. And as I say, I had my collaborator, and I would send him chapter by chapter my draft, and I would mark, okay, I don't get this, or what does this word mean, or what. I mean, I use good dictionaries with all the there was a lot of technical terminology as far as armaments and other, things like that. I just want to say another thing about your outfit. As I'm looking at bookstores around here anyway, so many of them are really geared to people who seem to want to almost avoid reality. I'm going to just say that, you know, everything has to be upbeat, cheery. In Vermont, everything has to advertise Vermont. I don't care whether Vermont governor cares about that. I'm just saying everything has to be promotional in some way or another, either promoting the author and turning the author into a celebrity or something. You probably kind of know this. And to discover hidden gems, which really is focused on the content and on the communication aspect of literature, you know, that was, you're a hidden gem. I mean, that's really, no kidding. I mean, that's so unusual. I wish there were more groups like you. So yeah, that's my feeling about it.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you very much for saying that. You know,
Yeah.
we just operate in integrity, and we want to give uh one of our goals, I'll say this, one of our goals with self-published authors is that we want to tighten the threads in the fabric of the bookish community, so that when an author self-publishes a book, there's already a strong platform for them to tap into, so that they don't feel like they need to go to Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, where they're not making as much profits for their books. And
Yeah.
so
Okay.
we're happy to be here. I thank you so much for saying that. And, anything that we can do for you, or, well, we'll be in touch. So,
Okay.
I
Great.
really thank you so much for your time today. Please come by Hidden Gems Literary Emporium Monday through Thursday to get your copy of The Sky is Red, translated by Julia Purdy. Or give us a call at 609-361-4331 to have a copy of this book shipped to your home. Anybody who could hear the sound of my voice, we love you for listening and reading. And make sure you stay in touch with Miss Purdy and all she has going on in her life.
Thank you, Kayla.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Bye now.
Bye bye.